And welcome back to the CNC3 Early Morning Show. I'm Hamid Ghany in this morning for Hamid Ghany, who is on vacation. Well, the euphoria of the U.S. election obviously has taken that to the top of the news, and we've reshuffled a little bit of our schedule of appearances here. We do have joining us on the set in a few minutes, Nigel Henry, who had worked with the Obama campaign. Subhas Ramkilawan is going to join us shortly after that. But before we get to all of that, we need to look at an excerpt from President Barack Obama's victory speech last night, and we'll take in a few minutes of that, and then we'll have a chat with Nigel Henry, who had worked on the Obama campaign at some time before. So let's take in Barack Obama now. Okay. Welcome back, and that was an excerpt from President Barack Obama's victory speech last night upon confirmation of his re-election as President of the United States for another 4 years. Well, in studio with me now is Nigel Henry, who had worked in the 2008 Obama campaign as a targeting manager in the southeast of the United States. Mr. Henry, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Your initial reaction to the re-election of President Obama?
Well, I'm happy that he has another term. I'm not surprised at all, to be honest. Yeah, I expected it.
But were you surprised by how tight it was?
No, I think it makes sense that it would tighten because of the state of the economy and what's happened over the last 4 years.
What do you think pulled him out at the end of the day? I mean, these polls are going back and forth, back and forth. The debates obviously had an impact. Then there was Hurricane Sandy. Then we had the final push. What do you think may have done it in the very end of the day, at the very end of the day?
I think as you said, there were a lot of tides, ebbs and winds of Sandy and the debates, and so. But underneath that, there was a strong current that this is about the economy, and I think voters in the United States, they're not really thinking about what the candidates say, like I can grow the pie, so to speak. I think whether they express it this way or not, they realize the pie is shrinking, and therefore they're really thinking about, okay, who's gonna get me, the middle-class voter, the bigger piece of the pie. And I think they realize that, or they expect that will be the president who would do that, as opposed to Romney's policies.
Now, you worked in the 2008 campaign as a targeting director in the southeast of the United States.
Yes.
What does a targeting director do?
All right, so the Obama campaign really pushed the envelope on the use of targeting. What it is, it's the use of statistical models in order to help the campaign decide where to spend its resources. Put a simpler way, I crunched the numbers and I helped them decide which exact voters in which particular counties and pockets and which email addresses to send messages to and so on.
All right. Now, we saw it through the night, and this is a feature with many U.S. elections. The polls are closed and wherever,
That's right.
Whatever network is projecting that Barack Obama or Mitt Romney, whoever, has won the election. And you see that's less than 1% of precincts reporting or 5% of precincts reporting. Talk to us a little bit about exit polling and that kind of projections that the U.S. networks can do, even though the raw votes have not yet been counted.
Of course. So in order to prepare for the projections, the networks, what they do is they do exit polls. Essentially, they stand out of the polling, out of their polling booths, and they ask the voters as they come out one by one, okay, who did you really vote for? They match that against what the polls, the telephone polls would have been leading up to the election. And then they take a small sample of the votes coming in, as you say, 1%. And if all three things line up, they can very comfortably make a projection. If the race is closer, within a couple of percent, they need to become a little bit more confident that these things are absolutely lining up, as we see with Florida not yet called. I just want to say, though, in terms of the campaigns are a little bit more sophisticated because the campaigns have actually been talking to these voters all the time. In the southeast United States, for instance, 4 years ago, we had talked to, in some way, whether it's by the phone or knocking on the door or something, to about 50% of the voters in the state. So the question the campaigns ask is not whether they're from one side or the other, but actually looking at who voted. And by getting the results of who voted, they have a pretty good sense of whether they won the state or lost the state.
And in terms of how this plays throughout the evening, I know in very tight elections, you have these sort of battleground states.
That's right.
And the demographic of battleground states can change over the years.
Yes.
what are some of the things that make a state a battleground state? Let's say it may not have been 4 or 8 years ago. It's a battleground state now.
Yeah.
It becomes a... talk to me a little bit about the demographic issues involved and what do number crunchers like you look for?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, battleground states are essentially what we think of as marginal constituencies here in Trinidad. It's a constituency that could go one way or the other, and because we have the first past the poll system versus the one-man, one-vote system, you can win a seat, or in this case a state, by one vote or 1 million votes. It doesn't matter. It only counts one way or the other. They don't split the votes. That way, the ones that can go either way, they consider those battlegrounds. Now, to answer your question about demographics and so on, you know, the U.S. seems very sophisticated where they talk about issues as opposed to issues about demographics. You know, one would think that they're a little bit more sophisticated than we are in Trinidad, where there's a lot of talk about race around election time. But to be honest, it's actually not that different. You know, race is only one issue, but you have gender issues, you have issues with age and so on. And once those things change, a state may come into play, as they say. So for instance, North Carolina was one of the states that I worked on. What we were able to do in North Carolina 4 years ago was to push African American turnout to extraordinary high levels, greater than they were historically at any point in time. And that was able to push Obama to win the state of North Carolina 4 years ago. This year around, things are a little bit different. The demographics have changed slightly, but really there were other factors in play, the economy and so on, that pushed North Carolina out from the upper echelons of the battleground states.
Right, because Barack Obama did lose North Carolina.
Yes, he did.
But he held Virginia.
That's right.
And for most of the night, he was trailing in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Any sense of, like, what would cause that? I know that the Fairfax County and those counties in the north part of the state may have played some kind of role in that. But what you seem to be suggesting is that turnout is the big issue.
Yes.
So to get the people out to vote, so that when you do these opinion polls about likely voters and registered voters, that's another piece of the lingo that I think we just want to get a sense on, or a handle on, because some opinion polls are based on registered voters and some are based on likely voters. Talk to me a little bit about that.
So turnout is not 100%. In the United States, it's pretty high, but it's not 100%. If you were to somehow get in contact with every single voter, you may have a different result compared to people who actually take the time and go and vote, whether it's by mail or whether it's in person. So what we could do to be a little bit more sophisticated in our projections, we could actually try to figure out whether someone is likely to vote or not. Once you're able to do that, to sort of filter out the unlikely voters, you have a better sense of what what the result might actually be. Just one more point about that. Typically, the unlikely voters have swung more Democratic. So Democrats generally push on voter registration and other means of increasing the voter turnout and pushing a lot of these registered voters to actually become more likely voters.
Right, because I know that in the opinion polling, you see that, you know, it's a sample of, what, 1,023 likely voters across all of the United States, and it's a telephone poll. Let's talk a little bit about time zones and the impact of voter results, you know, from, you know, in states in certain time zones and states in time zones where they're still voting. We've got to take a break. I want to come back. I want to talk to you about time zones and voting. Okay. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And welcome back to the CNC3 Early Morning Show. I'm Hamid Ghany, and this morning for Hamid Ghany, who's on vacation. Scenes there from Kenya today reacting to President Barack Obama's re-election as President of the United States for the next 4 years. I have in studio with me Nigel Henry, who had worked with the Obama campaign in 2008 and who is very familiar with a lot of these inside aspects of the workings of campaigns. And you, of course, were a key number cruncher in terms of helping the Obama campaign make resource decisions in the southeast of the United States. Talk to me a little bit about Florida, because Florida remains outstanding, and there's a lot of talk about which way it's going to go. What's your take on where Florida is going to end up?
Yeah, so as you said, CNN hasn't called Florida as yet, but as a number cruncher, you could imagine I'm crunching the numbers all now. I ran my model. I made a statistical model, and I think when all is said and done, President Obama is going to win Florida by about 50,000 votes.
So it's breaking news off the set.
Yeah. Here
Nigel
on CNC3.
Nigel Henry calls the state of Florida.
That's right.
For Barack Obama.
That's right. Once you know which counties haven't come in yet, you can look at historical trends and see how this year has compared with 4 years ago and make a call. And I'm ready to do that.
You're ready to make the call?
Yeah,
okay,
Obama.
You know which counties are still outstanding?
Counties in southern Florida, which are heavily Obama. Those are going to come in sometime today, I guess.
Okay, now, of course, if it finishes inside of 1%, it's a mandatory state recount.
That's right. That's right.
You think it's going to come inside that
so
1%?
Like I said,
it may trigger a statewide recount.
Yeah, it may. Like I said, my projection is about 50%, which is exactly it's 50,000 votes. I'm sorry, so it's going to be within the 1%.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're not going to spend a lot of resources in what it doesn't really matter whether he wins Florida or not right now.
All right. Now, talk to me a little bit about the Electoral College and the popular vote, because in the 2000 election, Vice President Al Gore won the popular vote. He got about 700,000 more votes than Governor George W. Bush, but Governor Bush won the Electoral College. So you do have that separation between the Electoral College. And right now, it's pretty close on the popular vote. President Obama has about 50% of the popular vote, Governor Romney about 48%. But so far, President Obama has a lopsided finish in the Electoral College. He has 303 Electoral College votes, and Governor Romney 206. Talk to us a little bit about that.
That's right. It's very important to understand that if you want to understand the U.S. election. The vote is very close nationally. Like you said, 2%. When you count up the Electoral College, which is how the U.S. president is elected, it's almost 100 points difference out of 538. So what happens is it's not one man, one vote. It's not that they add up everyone who voted and whoever has more is president, as you said. What one does is you add up the votes by state and you try to figure out, well, within a particular state, who has more votes? And once you do, you would then win the electors for that particular state, which is apportioned by population. So a big state like Texas would have 34 out of the 538 electors, and a smaller state like New Hampshire would have 4 out of 538. Because Obama, and I believe because of his targeting operation and his field operation, he was able to consistently perform against almost all of the battleground states, consistently winning them by 1 or 2%. And once you add those up, you get, like you said, lopsided victory.
Right, and just for the benefit of our viewers, of course, the number of votes allocated to each state for the Electoral College is based on the size of their congressional delegations. So every state has 2 senators, and then you add the House of Representative members. So there are 29 Electoral College votes in Florida, 2 senators and 27 House of Representatives districts to give you the 29. But the senators and the House of Representative members are not the actual electors in the Electoral College. It's just used to calculate the size of the Electoral College allocation. We're coming to the end of the interview. I just wanted to get a quick word from you on vote splitting, because the Republicans have retained the House of Representatives. Yes. The Democrats are on course to retain the Senate, and the Democrats are on course to retain the White House. Clearly, you have a situation in which there is vote splitting. They can vote for more than one office, and obviously you get votes that go, you may vote Democrat for the president and Democrat for the Senate, and you may vote Republican for the House of Representatives. Just talk to me a little bit about that phenomenon in American politics, because it goes way down the list. Governor, it goes district attorney and state senators, state House of Representatives. There's so many elected offices.
That's right. It's very interesting. In that sense, it's a little bit different from Trinidad, where you're paying them till you're dead, or on the other side. But it's actually quite common for someone to vote For instance, let's say a Democrat for president and a Republican for governor and so on. Some of that has to do with the historical shifts. Democrats were very strong in the South in the 1950s, but now it's almost solidly Republican, and therefore you have persons on the local level who are essentially Republicans in name Democrats in name only. They're essentially Republicans in all their policies, who may go for a lower level seat. So then, if you are such a voter who would vote along those policy lines, you may actually vote for, let's say, John McCain for president, and then the guy next door who says he's a Democrat, but you have the same ideology as him, even though he's running as a Democrat. One other thing I want to say, vote splitting accounts for parts of it. The other side is that you have drop-off on the tickets. So particularly infrequent voters and unsophisticated voters may actually vote for president and not vote for any of the other offices. And that's why you might have what looks like vote-splitting results.
And does it work the other way? Do you have people who don't vote for president, just vote for the local stuff?
I haven't heard that.
There's an old expression, all politics is local.
I have not heard that too much. I know on so-called off years, you may come on and say, Dr. Ghany, I don't vote at all, but because I know you, I'm going to vote you for mayor, and forget about the rest of the guys. But people who look at the statistics and who have measured this, it's almost never the case where someone would not vote for president and vote for local offices.
Now, in coming to the closing comments on this, how do you view the whole election in terms of if we take it from the period right after Labor Day, after all of the conventions coming down to this, we went through the debates and we came down to the final election, the final stretch. What do you think may have been some of the challenges for number crunchers who would have played the role that you would have played going through this particular period, especially after that first debate, when all of the polls just suddenly tightened up and Mitt Romney was back in the game?
Yeah, I think at that point in time, the upper-level strategists would run to people like myself, the targeters, and say, what's going on? Who are these people who are changing their minds in an election where everyone's already decided? So I think that's the biggest thing that one would need to do. And also, in terms of turnout, you have early voting, where people could actually vote in person or absentee by the mail before the date. And number crunchers need to keep really good tabs on that, and because you don't want to send resources in places where people have already voted.
And we noted yesterday that President Obama had finished campaigning on Monday night, but yesterday Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan were in Pennsylvania and in other parts. Just as we go, campaigning on election day in the U.S., it's obviously legal.
Yeah, it's absolutely legal and probably expected.
Okay. Well, Nigel Henry, we got to leave it there. Thanks so much for coming in. And I just want to say that we really appreciate your insight into what goes on behind the curtains in running campaigns and crunching numbers for campaigns. So thanks for sharing your expertise from the 08 to Obama campaign, and also for giving us some insights on this, and also for projecting Florida. Yeah. So we'll see what happens with that.
We'll see what happens.
Thanks very much. We take a short break, and when we come back, we have Subhas Ramkilawan coming to join us. Stay with us. We'll be right back.